The visit to India by U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis could have been a significant step in the expansion of ties between Washington and New Delhi. Mattis's visit technically focused on wider sales of American weaponry and the situation in Afghanistan. But a warning to Pakistan that he indirectly announced during his press conference with his Indian counterpart may be worth a closer attention. Without naming Pakistan, the U.S. top general said Washington had no stomach for countries that support terrorist groups.
Our two countries recognize the threat that global terrorism poses to people throughout the world. There can be no tolerance of terrorist safe havens. As global leaders, India and the United States resolve to work together to eradicate this scourge.
This was an echo of what President Donald Trump said against Pakistan in August. What appeared to have been a verbal offensive against Islamabad could have been meant to serve certain strategic targets that could be well beyond Pakistan.
I think the purpose of this visit is to bring India and U.S. much closer than they are at the moment. And the U.S. is doing it for two different reasons. The first, of course, is the U.S.-Pakistan relationship at the moment is at its lowest point. I mean, if you have seen in the past few weeks, there have been very strong statements coming from both the capitals, Washington, D.C. and Islamabad. The new Pakistani Prime Minister was in the U.S. Last week, and again, he didn't have a very good audience with American ministers. So the relationship is constantly going down. And for U.S. to stabilize the situation in Afghanistan, or for U.S. role in Afghanistan, they need a very strong partner. And the U.S. is looking at India as that kind of partner.
Pakistan had for years been a client state of the United States, but has tried to form a strategic partnership with China over the past few years. This was particularly manifest in Beijing's multi-billion-dollar investment in the construction of an economic corridor between the two countries in 2013. This could therefore provide a good reason for the U.S. to look for a way to punish the Pakistanis. Analysts believe Washington's efforts to demonize Pakistan would help push it toward Beijing, but this surprisingly will not be free from benefits for both the U.S. and China.
So I think we have a very clear equation emerging in South Asia. India getting its arms and ammunition from U.S. and Pakistan getting it from China. I think it's a very good win-win situation for both China and U.S., which will make a killing by selling arms to both these countries.
America's strategy to develop strategic relations with India could also be meant to weaken an anti-imperialist alliance in which BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa, are involved. But there are still doubts about the possibility that a country like India would abandon an alliance that has already provided it with strong economic privileges.
Yeah, I think that's the old American strategy to weaken the BRICS grouping, because BRICS is offering an alternative narrative to the international order as is run by Washington, New York, London, and Paris. The group has really become very powerful because of China's economic muscle, and they'll be very happy to see a conflict emerging between India and China that weakens the BRICS grouping, that weakens the New Development Bank, which is now based in China. But I think India understands its position very well. India understands what U.S. needs India for as a counterbalance against China. But I don't think India will enter into conflict with China on behalf of U.S. Also because India knows that if there's a conflict between India and China, U.S. will not be there physically, militarily to support it.
It's already clear that the geopolitical map in South Asia is set to see some major changes, and that is particularly evident in moves by India and Pakistan to shift their decades-long alliances. It thus appears that the stability in the region that has at times been taken to the brink as a result of tensions between the two nuclear-armed enemies will soon be at risk.
The recent secession referendum in Iraq's semi-autonomous Kurdistan region has antagonized regional governments. The Kurds have soured relations with Iran, Turkey and Syria and the central government in Baghdad. The neighboring countries had warned Erbil against its dangerous secession plan. The vote has raised regional tensions and even the possibility of an armed conflict. Ankara said following the vote that it does not rule out the possibility of military action. But not everyone in the Middle East is angered by the controversial referendum. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressed strong support for the planned secession. The vote has revealed the depth of the discrete ties between Israel and the government of the Kurdistan region. Netanyahu's public expression of support has raised concerns about Israel's motives in backing the secessionist drive in a region that borders two of Israel's sworn enemies, Iran and Syria.
One of the main reasons that the United States and Israel and other Western allies have focused on the Kurdish people has been because they've had a partner in the region to not only subvert Iraq and also subvert Iran in the region, but also throughout Azerbaijan against the Russians as well.
Israel, along with its ally the United States, has suffered major defeats in the region. For instance, Israel's favorite militant groups in Syria have been losing ground at an unprecedented pace, and the government in Damascus is emerging victorious after years of foreign-backed militancy. Also in Iraq, the Daesh terrorist group, which is believed to have links with Tel Aviv, is almost completely defeated. The terrorist groups have been dealt serious blows thanks to Iran's anti-terror efforts. Many observers believe by backing the planned secession of Kurdistan, Israel is trying to make up for its defeats in the region. Some say Israel wants to use the northern Iraqi region as a base to pressure Iran, Iraq and Syria from.
This has been a long-standing relationship that has unfortunately caused and wreaked chaos throughout the region. And I think one of the things that the United States has used it for is the same thing that the United States and Israel have used other things for. And it's really a war profiteering operation, as well as the ability to disband and governments such as what they've done to Syria and Iraq, and what they would like to do to Iran once again, very much like they did when they overthrew Mossadegh.
Israel's ties with the Kurdistan region dates back to the 1960s. Kurdistan is reportedly selling the bulk of its oil to the Israeli regime through Turkey. And intelligence cooperation between the two sides has been expanding.
This is actually an ongoing process. It will unfortunately blossom or continue to grow at a massive rate, given the fact that if the Kurdish regional government is given some sort of sovereignty, I believe that the United States and unfortunately Israel will become very close partners, and the actual scenario where it will just explode into more turbulence and violence, and unfortunately the Kurdish people will suffer.
The Israeli-backed secessionist movement is probably doomed to failure. That's because the Kurdistan region is landlocked, with all its neighbors now vehemently backing the central Iraqi government and opposing a planned secession of the Kurdistan region. A coordinated blockade of Kurdistan by these neighboring countries would be devastating for the region's economy. That's why observers believe Kurdish leaders will eventually have to listen to regional governments. The Israeli project to mount pressure on its regional enemies could hurt the Kurdistan population if Kurdish leaders fail to realize the fact that their ambitions are being used by the Israeli regime.